superintendent, and view it on the screen that is best angled for you.
Good evening. I'm Shevra Evans, President of the Board of Education.
And I'm Jack Smith, MCPS Superintendent. Thank you for attending our district-wide boundary analysis meeting. While we are unable to join you in person, we want you to hear from us about the origins of this boundary analysis, what it is and what it isn't.
On January the 8th, 2019, the Board of Education adopted a resolution asking MCPS to hire an external consultant to conduct an in-depth review and analysis of existing school and cluster boundaries and the impact they have on school utilization, student diversity, and geographic proximity to schools.
After gathering input from the community regarding the scope of work for the analysis, MCPS issued a request for proposal. In August, the board selected WXY Studios to complete that analysis.
WXY will be gathering data and engaging the community over the next several months and will present a final report to the board in June 2020. It is important to share that the report will not provide any recommendations for the board to vote on. Instead, the report will serve as a critical data resource for the board as we undergo school-specific boundary studies in the coming years.
We value your input in this process. We know this is an issue that many community members feel passionate about. We welcome that passion. We ask you to be respectful and civil with each other and everyone.
Thank you again for participating in this boundary analysis meeting.
Great. So that was just to kind of get us all grounded at a very high level on the purpose of this process and part of what we're going to be doing today. I want to briefly share the agenda for this morning. The first 15 minutes or so, we're going to be giving an overview of the project team. We're also going to be sharing, right at the very beginning, the responses to frequently asked questions that we've already been hearing at the first two meetings as well as through online. And so we believe that will help to really set the stage for what we're doing, what we're not doing, to the board president's point, and really get clear up front what this is all about, and so we can have a productive meeting. And there will be an opportunity to do table introductions then in that opening segment at the table. We have facilitators, process facilitators at every single table. If I could ask them to raise their hands. They're volunteering their time today, and many of them multiple times throughout this process, to make sure that everyone's voice is heard at every single table and that we capture all of those ideas, all of that feedback throughout this meeting and the meetings to come. So that table introduction process will also be an opportunity. If there are any things that we share in this opening segment that still need to be clarified, we will quickly clarify them after you've had a chance to identify what may still be not entirely clear to you. And then the rest of the session will really be learning more about the history of Montgomery County Public Schools, how the demographics has changed, how the county has grown, and the impact that that's had on schools. And then we'll be doing 3 short presentations, followed by 3 table discussions, where you're going to be learning about the 3 lenses that the school board has asked us to really focus on, and that is school utilization and capacity, student body diversity, and proximity to schools. And Adam from WXY will share in a lot more detail what is meant by that. And then we want your feedback. We want your feedback on what you heard. You can see at the tables you've got these blue books that actually cover even more material than we're going to present today, but these are books that you can take home with you. We have participant worksheets, so if you want to jot down things over the course of the presentation or the discussion and leave them behind, we're going to be collecting all the worksheets from all these sessions and theming them, summarizing them, synthesizing them. So your input is really important throughout this entire meeting. We're also going to be using some polling devices, so everyone should have a polling keypad. We'll use it, I think, twice during the meeting to get your input and feedback. And we will also be reserving the last 15 minutes for Q&A. If there are still questions that people have, we'll be doing that where people can, we'll be going around with the microphone, people can ask their questions, and our team will answer those questions. So that's the agenda. It's packed. We're going to be very busy, 10 a.m. to noon, and we look forward to hearing your input. Let me put up the next slide. So in particular, and I've already said this in the agenda review, but we're wanting to share with people kind of how the school system has changed and what that, how that intersects with the boundary analysis. In particular, exploring in greater depth these three lenses that I talked about: utilization, diversity, and proximity. And to be looking at that, at the impact of those both within and across clusters, as well as at the different level of schooling, right? Elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And then, next slide. So again, as I said, so this is going to be a combination of focused, concise presentations, so we can share what we've learned so far and what our current thinking is, but these public meetings are really about, so what's your feedback on it? What's your response to that? Are we missing anything? Are we missing anything critical? So that at the tables, that's your opportunity to really give us that concrete, discrete feedback. Our facilitators are going to be capturing the full range of comments that get made at each table. They'll be writing it on their yellow worksheets. They'll be handing those in, but like I said, if you want to leave your worksheets with us or with your table facilitator, we'll be looking at all the data that gets generated out of every single table. And like I said, we're going to be doing some polling. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn it over to Adam Lubinsky from WXY, and he's going to share with you kind of the answers to 8 or 9 questions that we've been getting repeatedly over the last few weeks. I think you can use this, yes.
Good morning, everyone. Very pleased to be here today, and I apologize for those of you who are behind the column that can't quite see me. And so what we've done is taken some time to assemble responses to questions that have been coming up. We assume that some of these comments that we'll get from you, we will integrate into new FAQs over time. But it's really important for us to get through our workshop today, so what we've done is decided to take the first 5 or 10 minutes to go through some of the basic, frequently asked questions we've been receiving. This is an overview of those questions. What is the purpose of this study? Why is it being done now? How is this process related to Clarkburg-Seneca Valley boundary changes? How will the weighting of these 3 lenses factor into this analysis? And what is the MCPS board's approach to weighting these lenses? How will this study be analyzing diversity? Why is the current scope different from the original RFP? What is the final report going to address? What is the WXY's team experience? And will this analysis lead to boundary recommendations or changes? So we'll take the next 5 or 10 minutes to go through this, and then as Steve mentioned, we can take questions at the end as well. So just to go through this, and I know that MCPS has been working to communicate this as well. What is the purpose of this study? First, to provide a comprehensive assessment of school boundaries in light of county growth. Second, to receive community feedback on the challenges of creating diverse schools. Third, to understand the related challenges of utilization, diversity, and proximity in school clusters. Fourth, reinforce MCPS's core values of learning, respect, excellence, and equity. And then finally, the purpose of this study is not to redraw school or cluster boundaries. So, the information is in a booklet on your table, and in terms of the FAQs, they will be shared. You'll note that it says FAQ responses draft because we've been working on them over the last day. They may have a word or two changed. They probably won't change much at all, but they will be released. So why now? On a very basic level, Montgomery County experiences tremendous amounts of growth. So there is a need for a kind of comprehensive assessment. Facility construction has not kept pace with growth. Overcapacity of many schools prompted the board to initiate an assessment. Finally, why now? To ensure that MCPS can continue to provide high-quality facilities that support the educational programming needed to reinforce the school's core values of learning, relationships, respect, excellence, and equity. We've also received questions about how this process is related to the recent Clarkburg-Seneca Valley boundary change. This process is not related to that. It's not connected to any current boundary studies or recently adopted boundary actions. Also, our team has not had any relation to this work at all. This analysis will not make any specific recommendations about boundary changes. Will this analysis lead to boundary recommendations or changes? No, this analysis will not lead to any boundary options, recommendations, or changes. In each public meeting, WXY will go into more detail on the timeline, scope, and outputs of this analysis. How will the weighting of the three lenses, utilization, diversity, proximity, factor into this analysis? What is the board's approach to weighting these lenses? We will examine and analyze all three of these lenses equally and will not prioritize one over the other. The FAA requires each of the four factors, geography, student body demographics, facility utilization, and stability of assignment over time, to be included in every review of school and cluster boundaries. This analysis will not reflect any preferences or weighting. Instead, the analysis will be an objective assessment of data and community inputs that will be used as a resource by the board. How will this study be analyzing diversity? This study will look at socioeconomic as well as demographic and ethnic diversity within the county. Given the limits of time and the public meetings, today's presentation will focus on EverFarms as an indicator of socioeconomic diversity. We will also be examining racial diversity through a dissimilarity analysis that focuses on clusters and localized geographies. We want to hear back today from you about what diversity means in Montgomery County Public Schools. And of course, that means if you have thoughts and ideas about different kinds of analysis that we should be doing, we want to hear about it. Why is this current scope different from the original RFP? Discussions during the selection process and initial procurement focused on a process with more community engagement and a scope of work focused on data analysis and community feedback, and not on the development of boundary recommendations or options. The revised scope substantially increased the number of open meetings, and we also had to prepare for large meeting turnouts. We added 20 meetings with hard-to-reach groups and 40 stakeholder conversations as well. We've also added other opportunities for feedback, online inputs, which will be coming soon, and an interactive tool, which will come in the second phase of the project. What will the final report address? Our job is to accurately and objectively represent existing conditions. This includes a deep dive into data and information, but also qualitative feedback that we're receiving from the community and the concerns that we're hearing from the community. The report will act as a critical resource for the board. It will help to reinforce the school system's core values of learning, respect, excellence, and equity. Once again, the purpose of this study is not to redraw school or cluster boundaries. What is our team's experience with school capacity and boundary analysis? We've been working for about the last year in the city of Lancaster with the school district of Lancaster to do a boundary study. They've already published 5 different options that we produced as part of our work with them. We worked with the city of New Rochelle, conducting a capacity and enrollment projection study. That work underpinned the environmental impact statement for their rezoning of downtown New Rochelle. We worked with Boston Public Schools. We produced an enrollment projection study, and we conducted a lot of analysis related to their last school assignment policy revisions, which I think went into effect in 2014. We've also worked with the New York City Department of Education. We helped to facilitate the District 15 Diversity Plan in Brooklyn, and we've recently started 4 more district diversity plans in New York City. We've done a number of smaller schools-related studies for public authorities, for developers as well. We also have a lot of experience doing large-scale engagement meetings and workshops, and critical to that, we're partnered with Public Engagement Associates. They've been a really important partner for us in this project, and they will continue to be. We have our main office in New York City. We also have an office in Washington, D.C. We also have on board our team, a group called Transpar, to help us with analysis of movement, mobility, and transportation. So, on to the presentation. Once again, we want to review our project objectives with you. First, we want to provide a comprehensive assessment of school boundaries in light of the county's growth. It's critical for us to receive community feedback on the challenges of creating diverse schools. We want to understand the related challenges of utilization, diversity, and proximity in school clusters. We want to reinforce the school system's core values of learning, respect, excellence, and equity. And finally, to re-emphasize the purpose of the study is not to redraw school or cluster boundaries. The project outcomes will result in a community engagement summary, including findings from an interactive tool. Once again, I can't emphasize enough, getting your feedback today is critically important for our work. We will have a data analysis summary of current utilization, diversity, and proximity to school, and we'll also do benchmarking compared with other similar school districts. This work will form a critical data resource to inform future boundary studies based on metrics tied to educational facilities planning policy indicators, including assignment stability, utilization, diversity, and proximity to school. We will not be making recommendations or creating options on potential boundary revisions. So I want to more formally introduce our team. Once again, Adam Levinsky. I'm the managing principal at WXY Studio. We're a firm, again, primarily based out of New York City with an office in Washington, D.C. We do a range of things: architecture, urban design, and planning, including, as you've seen, a lot of work in the school planning area. Our Washington, D.C. office and the project manager for this work is Kushan Dave. And we have a range of other people who are working both on the engagement and the informational and data side of the project. Amina Hassan is also a Montgomery County Public Schools graduate, Chris Rice, Kara Michelle, Mario Giampieri, and Raphael Laud. As I mentioned before, we have a really critical partnership with Public Engagement Associates. Steve Brigham here from Public Engagement Associates, but also Kim, who's here as well, and Theo Brown. And then I mentioned Transpar as well, Thomas Platt and Giovanni Constantino. And they will be really forming a technical base for some of our work. So as we've emphasized, this work is really about the integration and the interrelationship of utilization, diversity, and proximity. Looking at utilization, that considers issues such as building capacity, but also feeder patterns between elementary, middle, and high school. In terms of diversity, this will look at both demographics and socioeconomic status. In terms of proximity, that will be looked at in terms of distance to schools and existing transportation patterns. All three of those factors tie into the impacts on assignment stability, essentially trying to minimize the number of times a student would be affected by a boundary change. How are these lenses interrelated? We'll start to get into that today, really starting to see where does utilization, diversity, and proximity start to tie in together. And you'll see a lot of colors on maps, and what is critical to this is really starting to look at the adjacencies between different clusters and zones for all of these factors. The way our firm works in general, and the way we want to work in this process, is to really see data analysis and community engagement as inextricably linked. We want to get your feedback, which may in turn affect the kind of data analysis that we do, which we want to feed back to you in terms of their results. This should be a mutual learning process. In terms of the data analysis, looking at context, conducting objective research, using comprehensive models. In terms of community engagement, we'll have a number of approaches. Obviously, public workshops is part of that, but also reaching out to groups that don't often turn up to public workshops. That's a key part of our practice. We'll use innovative strategies. We've created a lot of printed materials for your tables. We've got facilitators here, and we want to create extremely legible findings. One of the things, as a firm that also works in the arena of design, we want to produce results that are very clear and transparent. Sometimes data can be very difficult to read. We like to make things as simple as possible. So we're just getting started. This is phase 1 here. We'll be conducting a lot of data analysis. We also have a lot of work underway, even as we're doing these sessions with you. We want to build community awareness about this project, and we want to gather your ideas and your responses. We'll be conducting 6 regional public meetings. This is the 3rd, and we'll also be starting our targeted outreach. In phase 2, I mentioned we'll be developing an interactive tool which will allow people to understand what this interrelationship between utilization, diversity, and proximity looks like. And that will run through the winter and spring. And then at the end of the spring, towards the end of the school year, we'll be producing our report. So now I'm going to turn back to Steve here and get us started at our tables.
Great.